What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Power Play with CJ. Now, this isn't a rumor. I was just scrolling through, the hockey internet today. Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News was talking about, the Rangers and Chris Kreider and trying to get him signed to an extension like they did with JT Miller before they go to arbitration, which is an understandable move. But he also floated that they could look to trade the Massachusetts native with a number of defensemen, Dumba, Shattenkirk, and Cam Fowler, being on their list of prospective, targets. The more I think about it, the more I really, really, really like the thought of Chris Kreider for Cam Fowler. You can slide Kreider in on that line in Anaheim with Getzlaf and Perry. He's a big guy that fits with them, and he gives, not that Getzlaf or Perry is necessarily slow, he gives you some speed to the outside that you can use. I like that fit. And I think Fowler in New York works as well. And the irony is I was pushing that the Rangers should have drafted Fowler back in 2010. Fellow arbitration eligible defenseman, or fellow first round pick in 2010, who's eligible for arbitration, Dylan McElrath. Yeah, that might have been Sather's worst pick. Actually, no, never mind, Hugh Jesselman. But I can at least, not to go too far off topic, I can see the logic with Jesselman because you could see the upside and be like, all right, whatever. Now, in fact, Zach Parise, Kessler, Dustin Brock, a couple other guys were drafted, in the picks following them. All right. But with McElrath, I remember watching that draft and being like, this dude's not as good as Fowler. And, CJ was right, per usual. No big deal. But, again, I think Fowler as a power play quarterback to kind of replace Yandel's role. I think, is he as good as Yandel? No. But I think he's an adequate replacement. And, I don't think there's that much of a drop-off between Fowler and Yandel. I think in the case of both Fowler and Chris Kreider, they can both use changes of scenery. They're both highly touted when they got to their respective teams, and they've definitely shown they can be really, really good NHLers. But I think to go to the next level, I'd like to see maybe different systems, different scenery, different circumstances for each player. Again, I think Kreider, he's peaked what he can be in New York, and again, as a good player. He's had 20 goals for the last 2 years, had 17 and 66 games the year before that. So obviously he's a good player. I'm not, discrediting that for 1 second. But, given what I thought he was going to be, especially when he, was at BC, I thought he was going to be, a better offensive player, at the NHL level. And I think, if you put him with a guy like a Getzlaf, Getz is a righty center, Kreider's a lefty left wing. Going to be some nice tip-ins, tap-ins, and deflections for him. So, we'll see what happens. But again, I'd like to see this trade. I think it could work well. And they're both, 24, Kreider's 25, Fowler 25 in December. So, I think they both have I think they can both grow. And we'll see what happens. That's all I got. Later, guys.